quelqu'un?
Qu'est-ce que c'était?
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
J'ai vu quelque chose.
Bon, ça suffit. S'il y a quelqu'un, montrez-vous.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? L'autostoppeuse. Qu'est-ce qui faisait tout cela?
Mais enfin, qu'est-ce que vous foutez dans la maison?
On va tous mourir. Il va les tuer.
Qui va tuer qui?
Mais qu'est-ce qui vous prend?
Oh, ma pauvre petite.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes et bienvenue dans cet épisode hors série de Jumpscare, votre podcast hebdomadaire sur le cinéma horrifique. Un épisode hors série, c'est pour ça qu'il sort le jeudi. Je vous rassure, demain vous aurez votre épisode classique sur Silent Hill normalement. Un épisode exceptionnel en soi puisqu'on reçoit aujourd'hui Marcus Nispel, réalisateur de Massacre à la tronçonneuse, le remake de 2003 produit par Michael Bay, et de son chef-opérateur Daniel Pearl qui a déjà été chef-opérateur sur le Massacre à la tronçonneuse original de Tobe Hooper. C'est un podcast qui s'est improvisé très très vite puisque en fait Marcus Nispel débarque à Paris pour la Comic-Con qui aura lieu le 12 et le 13 avril au parc des expositions de Villepinte pour ceux qui sont sur Paris ou qui veulent y monter, et je l'ai contacté pour l'interviewer en fait lors du Comic-Con, mais il a voulu faire le podcast en avance pour faire un peu de promo de son côté pour sa venue en France, etc. Bien sûr, en 10 jours, impossible de transcrire et traduire une discussion aussi longue. On a déjà coupé bien comme il faut, mais croyez-moi que c'était quand même 2h30 de podcast. Une discussion à deux, puisqu'il est venu accompagné de Daniel Pearl, et ça c'est fou quand même d'avoir le chef-opérateur des deux Massacres à la tronçonneuse dans le podcast. Donc, ce podcast va être proposé exceptionnellement en franglais. Les questions sont en français, les réponses sont en anglais. On s'excuse auprès des gens qui nous écoutent, qui ne comprennent pas l'anglais. On vous promet qu'une version française accessible sortira un jour. Un de ces quatre, par écrit, à l'oral, on sait pas, mais on n'avait juste pas le temps de tout traduire là sans mourir, en fait. Et on pouvait pas aussi passer cette opportunité, parce que quand Marcus Nispel t'appelle et te dit « Je suis chaud pour faire un podcast, là, demain, tout de suite, et j'arrive avec Daniel Pearl », bah tu dis oui, tout simplement. Donc voilà, on s'excuse pour ça, mais promis, si vous comprenez l'anglais, vous allez vous éclater. Il y a beaucoup d'anecdotes. Ça va commencer par, en guise de mise en bouche, un retour sur leur collaboration, puisqu'en fait, Daniel et Marcus travaillent ensemble depuis des années dans le clip musical. Et c'est comme ça qu'ils se sont rencontrés, et c'est de là, en fait, où ils sont commencés à bosser ensemble sur le remake de Massacre à la tronçonneuse. Donc pendant un petit quart d'heure, vous allez voir, ça parle de musique, de Maria Carey, évidemment. Et après, ça va enchaîner sur Massacre à la tronçonneuse. Et on n'a même pas eu le temps de parler de Vendredi 13, donc peut-être que cette année on en refera une interview avec eux et qu'on pourra traduire à l'avance un peu mieux, ce sera plus confortable pour tout le monde, sur Vendredi 13, si ça vous plaît évidemment. On le rappelle, Massacre à la tronçonneuse de 2003 est un film produit par Michael Bay, donc évidemment le débat va tourner un peu autour de lui par instant. Et puis voilà, n'hésitez pas à aller le voir, Marcus Nispel, au Comic-Con de Paris dans quelques jours. Il sera très content de voir ses fans, il sera très content de vous accueillir, vous allez voir, il est super fun comme mec et très très amical. Je serai pas loin, moi, de sa table de dédicace et de sa conférence, d'après la rumeur, donc voilà, n'hésitez pas à venir nous dire bonjour au passage pendant que vous passez, et puis voilà, on vous laisse avec cette interview. On est vraiment honoré de les avoir reçus, on espère refaire des collaborations avec eux, on est en train de discuter, tout ça, donc voilà, et on vous le redit, ça arrivera en français, un de ces quatre, et pardon pour nos accents anglais, évidemment, c'est le petit bonus du podcast. Donc voilà, profitez et bon podcast. So guys, thank you for being with us today. Comment ça va ?
Ça va bien, merci.
Daniel, you don't speak French? That's okay, that's okay. Alors, vous avez travaillé très longtemps ensemble, vous vous connaissez depuis très longtemps aussi. Est-ce que vous pouvez un peu nous raconter votre rencontre et depuis combien de temps vous travaillez ensemble?
Daniel, you go ahead.
Well, I would have thought that would be you to answer that question. Well, I guess what happened was Marcus selected me to work with him, and that's how we met. I mean, that's how it works. You know, directors make those choices. So I think it's best you answer the question.
We were doing music videos at the time, and Daniel was not only the premier guy for music videos, as a cinematographer goes, he was also the guy who got you the jobs. In other words, as a young director, as a first-time director, they don't necessarily trust you with big stars. And MTV, it's a responsibility. The labels, they wouldn't really give you the job unless you ponied up somebody who's done it before, and that's Daniel. In a way, Daniel has probably schooled more directors that are successfully working right now in movies, music videos, or commercials than all the film schools together at that time. And he taught me pretty much everything I know because I never went to film school, and cinematographers were my mentors. Daniel is not just a friend, he's a huge mentor of mine. And when people say jokingly, everything I know from him, he's that guy.
I think that Marcus read my page from the script because I should be saying those things, not him. Marcus,
Go ahead.
Marcus, the first job we did was a commercial. In fact, I probably only photographed 3 music videos for you in the 15 years we worked together. In fact, when we were doing Gloria Estefan, you explained to me why I don't shoot your music videos. Anyhow, I don't know what to say. The answer's so different from my experience. Anyhow, the way I recollect it was that it was a commercial. It was about a phone company because I remember a guy went out the window and fell down the building in the commercial. And I don't remember exactly who it was for, but the guy was sitting there spinning in his chair. He swung back, pushed himself too far, went out the window, and went all the way down the building. But he was holding onto the phone, and the cord on the phone shock cord brought him back up into the building before he hit the floor. That's what I remember.
It was downtown LA, and we practiced it with a blow-up sex doll.
That's right.
Then we were asked to stop it because it stopped traffic below us.
But what he said about me is in music video is true, but not as relates to Marcus. Marcus, you were way further along than you made it sound, and in fact. It was I learned a lot from Marcus. Now, part of this, and perhaps the confusion, is that Marcus and I have really one mind about light and composition and camera movement, and that's why our collaboration was so successful over the years. It didn't take a lot of conversation. I sort of knew intuitively what it was that he wanted, and therefore, I was able to deliver it quickly. But
it should be said that originally I didn't want to work with Daniel because Daniel was known to have done all the Boys to Men videos, which I absolutely abhorred. And I want to do dark shit. I don't want to do this pop stuff. I don't want my music videos to look like MTV, and I don't want my commercials to be polite. That's actually a word I picked up from Daniel. Nobody wants to be polite. Yes. And then suddenly I find out he did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and this body of work, which is really unfathomable. So I said, let's give it a shot. And from that moment on, he was always my first choice. You've done way more than 3 or 4 music videos for me. Are you kidding me? We did Fugees and we did so much.
Excuse me. Fugees, my all-time favorite. Fugees, absolutely. Excuse me, but
Kind of like Fugees.
He's lying. He's lying for my benefit. I happen to know November Rain is his all-time favorite.
I reckon we did over 200 commercials together. We did a lot of commercials. Okay, I'll up the number, but I don't think it's more than 10.
Well, at that time, I think I made a transition into commercials, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do everything I could possibly do with Daniel is I knew he would be shooting my first movie. And what I wanted was a familiarity, an almost invisible way of communicating, a quiet way of communicating in a way that is normally only possible between husband and wife. In fact, it's safe to say, I spent more time with Daniel than with my wife.
I'm not
blame him.
Don't blame me, blame the industry, not me.
Anyway, at the time, I started unholy matrimony with Ridley Scott and Tony, joining their company, and suddenly the caliber of commercials I got exposed to grew exponentially, and a big reason why I think Ridley thought I was a good pairing is I actually enjoyed shooting in his style. And I knew when I would do my first movie, I would want a rich, dark style that is highly atmospheric. And I was looking for the kind of material where Daniel could really shine, and a world that I could not really practice in my daily job doing pop soda commercials or music videos. So we shot a whole bunch of commercials and a whole bunch of music videos, way too dark.
That's for those of you who speak German. We refer to ourselves as the Dunkel brothers.
It was actually very funny. We got a television show that we shot a pilot for called Frankenstein, and it was a modern day retelling. Martin Scorsese produced it together with us, and it was based on a novel by Koons. Anyway, when we did it, the producer came, and Daniel can tell you, producer came and went like, well, he came after the color session and he goes, "You guys went way too dark. This is way too dark. I can't see anything, and I can't see any colors, and it looks drab." And I said, "Well, I always said it would have a look like The Godfather." And of course, I'm thinking of the original scene. And he goes like, "But they went to Tuscany and was colorful and bright and inviting." I go like, "I'm not going to do a bright and dividing Frankenstein. That's not what Daniel lit for, right? We're not going to." So in a telecine, in a color correction, they always flip from the original setting, from what it was shot like, to how it's supposed to look now. And I went, "Listen," and we already spent a week color correcting the film. I said, "Give me a day, and when you come back, it will all be brighter." So this is not easy to explain, but we screwed with his head. I asked the color corrector to lay the whole movie down even darker than what we did before. And when the guy came, I said, "All right, here's the scene before." And I showed him what we did way darker. And this is it now. Look how much brighter it is. Before, after, before, after. And the guy goes like, "This looks great. Let's order Chinese food." It was exactly what he saw before. We just compared it to something we adjusted way darker. And in a way that describes my work relationship with Daniel. we sort of always found a way of getting our vision done somehow.
It's all about the film, and the film has to be the absolute best that it could possibly be. Yeah. So people do consider that sometimes that I'm a little bit too concerned, but it's only because I care.
When he says he really cares what goes in front of the camera, I'm sort of like a vacuum cleaner on set. I just want to shoot all the time, and he wants to light all the time. So in a way, when we started out working for sure, we realized that our interests were diametrically opposed. And when he realized that I started operating so I could shoot without his permission. What he would do is he would go to the camera and pull plugs or turn it off in areas I didn't know. There are many ways to turn off a camera. So I would he would just literally pull out a cable just to stop me from shooting. So I went okay, the guy's looking out for the goods.
Yes, I mean, he's not wrong about that. Daniel, you don't know it, but you're done. But of course, that's also the strength of our relationship, right? Is that because both of those things are important, right? Time is money in filmmaking, but also time is an opportunity to make it better. So you need a good blend, and I think that part of what Marcus is talking about, a big part of our relationship, is that we arrived at a place where I think it led us to a place where we could do the best work we could in the amount of time allotted, because it's the kiss of death to go long, because then everything becomes about what you're not going to do instead of about what you are going to do. So, it's good that both of us played the part that we did to achieve the work that we did. I think we did great work over many, many years.
Yes. Well, taking the time with lighting is also a way to make something that has a small budget look like a huge budget, and something that is not that scary at all make it look very, very scary. If you look at somebody like Jason, frankly, in the bright daylight, he looks like he works for Federal Express or UPS, right? So what is it? It's to turn all the lights off and then only turn on what you and point it at what you want to see very, very judiciously, smoke it up, make it atmospheric, make it suggestive. So it's never literal. That's all in cinematographer, and I would never rush that kind of the process. It's just many times it looked so good already, it'd still take half an hour. We should say that Daniel and me, in fact, anybody I worked with, never went over time, never went over budget, not by a second, not by a minute. Lily.
Vous avez réalisé d'innombrables clips musicaux avant de travailler sur Massacre à la tronçonneuse. Pour qui avez-vous fait des clips et pour qui avez-vous préféré travailler?
I'll tell you what, someone counted, not me. It's 487 music videos and 35 concerts, and my hearing is completely fucked from that. I'm sorry. So, that is absolutely the truth. So, okay, which artist do I enjoy working with? Well, I enjoyed working with Phil Collins. I worked with him quite a bit. Sting was great to work with. Billy Idol. And, of course, Mariah Carey.
Yes.
What she wanted to hear.
I can't leave out Mariah Carey. She'll pop out of the phone and strangle me. So I leave her out. No, of course, a many, very long and great relationship that I had with Mariah Carey. I
did a Mariah Carey video without Daniel. That was Make It Happen. That's not iconic. Nobody heard that song, did they?
Oh.
Careful, Lily's a huge fan.
Because Marcus, and you guys shouldn't put this in the thing, but because Marcus and we're talking, right? We were shooting Gloria Estefan, and you explained to me that I don't shoot your music videos because when people ask you to hire me, it's because they want what I do and not what you do. And I was sitting here, we had done well over 100 commercials together. We worked a lot, and I was standing on the beach in Miami, and you're explaining to me why I don't do your music videos. At which point, somebody from the label or from Gloria's team walks up and goes, "Oh, you're Daniel Pearl. Oh, we've been wanting to work with you so bad." They said, "Oh, don't say that in front of him. He'll fire me right now."
No. That's not true. No, what I did in music videos, usually I would show a reference. Right, and that particular video was, for lack of a better word, a Lenny Riefenstahl ripoff, was for the Olympics. So that kind of writes itself. And I think in music videos, it's very important to do something that nails the concept. And the concept is always different, right? So here's Olympics and something that looks like a mix between Bruce Weber, Herb Ritts, and Lenny Riefenstahl makes sense. And a good cinematographer can take that kind of reference and run with it. From that moment on, I don't say anything. And I think, Daniel, I don't think we had many conversations where, besides a quick reference, that I don't think I ever got overly opinionated to the style. We always knew what concept it had to serve. Yeah. I think the biggest thing, perhaps, in deciding on style was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I remember when I took that on, I decided that I've done way too many soda pop commercials and pop music videos, and I wanted to do something dark and sinister, and I wanted to do something raw. And my reference to Daniel was I wanted it to look like Snuff. I wanted to look really dark and creepy and like Snuff. So when the footage came in, we looked at it, and I said to him, I said, Daniel, it looks really, really good, but it doesn't look like Snuff. So Daniel said,
I remember that you went to Texas before I showed up. Obviously, you went to scout, and you called me up. You called me up and said, "This fucking Texas, I hate it. The sky is too blue, the grass is too green, everything has too much color." He said, "This movie, I want it to look like the movie should have the colors of vomit, should have the colors of puke, right? That's what it should look."
That's right. It looked like Bavaria.
Everything's too pretty, too beautiful here. So I did some testing, and we arrived at that if we skip bleed in a chemical process, which is odd because we thought for sure we would be the first people to or early in to do a digital intermediate, because we worked in digitally color grading our commercials and our music videos all the time. But for some reason, because they've decided it was too expensive, that we had to finish the film Texas Chainsaw Massacre in film, finished it on film in a laboratory. Nobody can believe that. When I tell cinematographers that, they go, no, it's a digital intermediate. I said, no, it is photochemistry only. And this basically created a challenge for us because it took us away from what we were used to doing and forced me to think about how I could control these colors for Marcus, but not with the luxury of a digital ability to adjust it, but to do it photochemically. So like I said, we arrived at this skip bleach, which did two things that we liked. It subdued the colors a bit. It also made the blacks chunkier, which is something we were always after. We really liked the dark blacks, and it popped the whites a little bit. It gave us some more contrast too. So we were very happy with finishing photochemically. Although initially we thought, oh my God, how we go back that far in time? It's going to be crazy. But it worked well.
Daniel, he has a huge history with Texas Chainsaw. For me, it was always a cinematic dark spot because I came of age in Germany, and in Germany, it was forbidden. It was not X-rated or R-rated. You just were not allowed to watch it. So I didn't know what it meant to people till I saw the attention we got the moment we said we would make this movie. And it was actually quite daunting for a first-time movie experience.
Obviously.
Get that much hate mail.
No, it's funny because Marcus had quite a struggle actually to get me to photograph Texas Chainsaw Massacre for him. I knew nothing about it. I was actually in Montreal, Canada, shooting Our Lady Prayer, I guess, and video. And you called me and you told me that Daniel, I'd just been hired to direct a remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Would you shoot it for me? Now, I had, at this point, a 15-year-old daughter. I've been telling people for years that I would never do a project like this again. Now I'm a different person. It's 29 years later. I don't think I would make this film. It's what I was telling people in interviews. But of course, I get the call from Marcus. Will you do it? I immediately said, yes, of course I'll do it for you. Fantastic. I mean, I consider Marcus to be a brother. And we're super close at that time. And how could I let my brother remake my film without participating? Well, the producers initially didn't feel that way about it. They resisted. And I think that I had worked for Michael Bay. And in fact, I think
he actually did his best music video of all times.
True, that's true. His Meatloaf, I Do Anything for Love. These are, in my opinion, Fuji's Ready or Not and Meatloaf, I Do Anything for Love are my two favorite videos of all time. Oddly enough, no nominations for me for either one of them, although I think they're two of my best music videos for sure. They have feature quality, work. There's no doubt about that. But anyhow, I think that the issue was about that Marcus is a first-time director, although at the top of the world in commercials and music videos at that time, it is his first feature. And producers don't like to give first-time directors their choice of cinematographer, especially in the days when it was filmed, because the cinematographer controls the camera, and if they're somehow unhappy with the director, they feel like if the cinematographer is their boy or girl, they can go to that person and get things done the way they want. But
wait, let me set this up. So they're like bullying me in those pre-production meetings, and they say, no. You want a cinematographer who's done something like this before.
Well, they said so many stupid things were said in the course of it. I mean, it's ridiculous. But at one point, Marcus is insistent. I think they offered you a cinematographer who had just come from a Disney Care Bears movie or something like that.
He did second unit photographer for the Care Bears movie. Marcus, we want you to work with a cinematographer who's done this before.
You can't make the Texas Chainsaw. Marcus, you can't make the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the guy who shot the Care Bears. He goes, I know that, Daniel. Anyhow, he holds out long enough, and eventually has them. They tell me you have to give us a sample reel. So I think a sample reel. Okay, fine. So quickly, I put together a reel with Fuji. Not the Fugees. The Divinals. I think I Touch Myself is the name of it. That Michael Bay directed. Meatloaf, I Do Anything for Love, that Michael Bay directed. Fuji's Ready or Not, that Marcus directed, and a copy of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's what I give them. Well, 24 hours later, Marcus, you called me up. You want to tell what happened?
Well, no, actually, I love what you said, because he says, what do you mean they want to work with somebody who's done it before? I'm the only one in the world who's done it before. It just gives you guys an idea about how you just want to scream out loud sometimes.
Yeah, this is true.
I don't make movies anymore, and it is because I have to answer asinine questions like that all day long. So I'm out. But that was how I had to fight for Daniel to be in his movie.
They called me, and the one last thing I'll say about this part of it is they said, okay, well, we think we might want to hire you, but we're worried in case it becomes a big success. Because you worked on the original, it could become all about you. Well, I started laughing. And they were, why are you laughing? I said, well, if it's a big success, just stop there, turn to each other and just high five and start laughing, because if it's a success, you're set for life. It doesn't matter how it gets there. It's only important that you make a good film. In maybe in editing, you'll put this in. The first meeting we had in Austin when the four of us were together for the first time, sitting, Marcus, you and I, and Foreman Fuller. And they go, so it's going to be gritty and grainy like the original? And I go, oh, well, we're going to shoot it in 16 millimeter. And they jumped out.
Those are trick questions, by the way.
That?
Those are trick questions.
Yes. That was a trick question when I said, if you want to shoot at 16 millimeter, yes. But that's how you get gritty and grainy, of course. Well, they went, no, are you crazy? And I said, well, so we're going to call up Michael Bay and tell him his first Platinum Dunes project is 16 millimeter? No way. I go, good, because I just learned, I assumed up until I arrived that it was going to be 2002, and there was going to be a 2002 selection of people in the van. There'd be an African-American, an Asian. There'd be a current soundtrack to be made. And they go, no, it's 1973. And I go, well, guys, I already did the gritty, grainy version of this for 1973. And I'm going to change this. I said, in the 29 years since then, our leader, Marcus, our other leader, Michael Bay, myself, and maybe a dozen or 24 other people, through a music video, we've elevated the visual aesthetic of this audience, right? And they're they need a different image. I mean, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, although the composition and the moves are quite interesting, it's a lot, it has very much a documentary feel, which helps to its realism.
Well, there was one thing that was really important for me. I was cool with an updated look, if that's what you want to call it. I knew I didn't want it to look like a commercial or music video, but something desaturated and dark and mysterious. So I was cool with that. But while I was storyboarding it, I decided that I actually liked something that is almost romanticized and somewhat poetic. And it started with the kill scenes, where I decided that every kill should be somehow poetic, somehow beautiful. So if you wonder why Pepper, for example, the character of Pepper, is wearing a down jacket in the middle of the summer in Austin, Texas, it's so that if the chainsaw sinks into her, it will look like Winter Wonderland, right? That was the poetic way of killing her. If you look at all the kills, there's always a poetic twist to it. And the same with the lighting. We kind of romanticized the unspeakable horror. And to me, in a way that is much more perverse than snuff. So therein lies the answer. But very often answers come out of problems. Problem, oh, we want to update the look. What does that mean? It's going to look like fluff now? Okay, how can I make that direction work for the movie, and how can that make the movie more distinct? So they asked me, or they asked me a lot about how does one go about a remake? And I say, you know how you do it? You get together with a group of people that like the material. If it's a newspaper article, if it is a TV show from the 70s, or you know, a real life event, or an animated movie, you talk to them and ask them what is it that is dear to them. What are the main things that we all agree makes it special? And there will be 10 points that are overlapping. Those 10 aspects have to be in the remake. Everything else got to be new. And that's how we went about Texas Chainsaw, and that's how we went about Friday the 13th. It was a good mantra.
Mathieu.
Oui, alors, bon, Daniel a déjà un petit peu répondu, mais vous, Marcus, comment est-ce que vous avez été, comment vous vous êtes retrouvé impliqué dans ce projet de faire un remake de Massacre à la tronçonneuse, et quelle a été votre réaction au moment où on vous l'a proposé?
Well, voilà. I'm glad you asked the question. In a way, Daniel answered it, but my recollection is quite different. So here's how I remember the story of when it was brought to me. I told my agent that I was absolutely not interested in horror, a remake, a sequel, prequel, anything like that. I'm European. I'm an auteur. I'm supposed to make important films, and I have none of that. So when they sent me the script of Texas Chainsaw, I literally, and I'm not exaggerating, threw it through my hotel room and called my agent and complained. I said, it's the opposite from what I'm looking for. And then I called Daniel, kind of tattletale, and say, guess what? They want to make your movie. It's preposterous. How dare they? And he was really calm and collected. And he said, you know, you need to direct it. I said, well, why me? And he says, because you will hire me and I get to shoot the same movie twice. And I was like, fuck yeah, that's going to get him into the Guinness Book of World Records, because no cinematographer has ever done it before. So it started like a complete prank. And I didn't take it all that serious. Again, it was not on my monitor. I never saw the movie. It was not allowed in Germany. So I finally watched it, and then, you know, I read the script by Scott Kozar, and I couldn't put it out of my hands. It takes me a long time to read a script, a long time, sometimes a week. I read it in 90 minutes real time, and I knew how the movie was supposed to be made. Pretty much all my decisions were made in this one read. That never happened to me before, and it never happened again. And that's why I ultimately decided to engage. Now, Daniel, if I remember, you had a talk before with Tobe, because if I understand it right, Tobe considered doing it himself, the remake, didn't he?
I'm sorry, Marcus, I don't recollect it that way. But what I have to tell you is that I've done a lot more drugs than Marcus, so go with his version of it. I've done lots, and he's done none. So you can decide who's telling you the right story.
It's better that way.
Yeah, this way you can choose. You have a choice.
Did Tobe give you his blessing to do it?
I did not talk to him before engaging on it. I didn't want to be skewed one way or the other. And God forbid, he probably would hate the idea. Later, I found out that he was a participant. Obviously, he also owns the rights.
Right, yeah.
So I was very, very stressed about finally meeting him, which was at the premiere at the Chinese theater. And he was beaming. He was very, very happy.
That for me, that was huge. That's actually the first time I spoke to Tobe about this project, was to make sure I got him to come to the premiere, because for me it was very important that I thought that we'd done a great job in remaking his film, and he loved it as well. He was very, very, very impressed by it, and had a lot of good things to say about it. But I can tell you this much: there's no way on earth that Tobe would have lasted in the Michael Bay organization for a moment. It just wouldn't have happened. Difficult enough for you, but you, from your years of making commercials, you're a little bit more used to sort of leading people down your path, and Tobe just would not have functioned well at all in that situation. It would have been a complete disaster.
Well, they're saying, what is the job of a director? And my answer is, a director is somebody who leads people into a direction that they're not necessarily inclined to take on their own. You see, for me, that's my job, and that's easy. To recreate something, if it's Tobe who did the original, or Daniel who did the original, and is largely, or always was largely, defined by it. I mean, for crying out loud, it's a permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Arts. To suddenly go back into the seat and do it one more time, that is daunting, because chasing your own shadow is an impossibility. And so for him, I can imagine, for Daniel, it was much, much more difficult to wrap his head around that than it was for me. I would never dare to remake anything I've done before. In fact, Daniel and me once had a shoot day on Frankenstein, and it was magic. We did, I think, 80 setups in a day. We melted snow, and it looked great, and the performances were stellar. At the end of the day, they rushed the footage to the lab in LA from New Orleans, and it got X-rayed, and it screwed up the film. So we had to get back together and repeat that day. That, without a question, was worse than pulling teeth. It was the worst day I ever felt. We got it done, but it was pure agony.
I completely agree with Marcus. It was so difficult for us, because when we did it the first time, it was coming from our heart, from our head. We were doing it the second time, it was coming from our ass. We were trying to copy what we had done before. It's not how we work. Neither one of us worked that way, and we found it very, very difficult to do that. I want to mention Marcus saying how daunting the project was. Is that I had told Marcus, I was working for Tobe. I shot the remake of Invaders from Mars for Tobe right before he went to do Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And I told Tobe, I said, Tobe, you shouldn't do this film because you're basically offering up the success of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on a platter when you make 2. And if it doesn't work out as well, then everybody's going to say you got lucky the first time. Now, Marcus had heard this story, and Marcus knew how I felt about that. And I always thought that one of the reasons you held out, additional reason you held out for me to shoot for you, was that you knew that no one would care more than me to make this film great. That it absolutely had to be a great film, or else I would be subject to the same thing. I got lucky the first time, 29 years earlier. So I think that's a big part of your motivation, that why you held out for me so strongly, and I did. I also decided that I would never mention that I worked on the original. Because that'd be super boring if all day long, on the original, that'd be super boring. So I chose not to, except for at one point. But anyway, Marcus, you take it.
You actually did once, and I love that you did it, because a lot of people say, "Oh, you had probably a much bigger budget and many, many more shoot days." Obviously, inflation made what we had look like very little. Most of the money spent was above the line. In other words, rights holders, producers, New Line, all that. The below the line was, I think, somewhere around $2 million. That's not a lot. And with inflation and everything, if you put it in account, it bought us, how many shoot days did we have?
I'd say it's 30.
And the original had how many?
28 or 30.
Yeah. Daniel came with the shot list of the original and the schedule, and we had exactly the same amount of days, the same conditions, the same everything. Another thing where people compare it a lot is a lot of the sophisticated critics accused the first Texas Chainsaw of having too much blood. And Tobe would always point out that there was hardly any blood in it.
Yeah.
And then when they reviewed our movie, the remake, again, they said, well, the first one had hardly any blood, but this one, it was like blood. They were knee deep in blood. And I made sure, and so did the producers, that there was no more blood than in the first one. It's in people's perception. And perception, when you make a remake, is such a huge thing. This is a movie people hold really dear. And it is always the first horror where you lose your virginity in horror that becomes the benchmark of how everything has to be. My favorite movie of all times is Rocky. I watched Rocky in Salem, Massachusetts in a movie theater, and I never had an experience watching a movie like that again. It was like a live event. It was Muhammad Ali fighting Foreman. Right? It was like that. People stood on their seats. They were throwing popcorn at the screen. I had to watch the movie 3 times till I realized the guy lost. It was just such a euphoria. And if somebody would tell me right now that they're remaking Rocky with another actor, I would say, like, go fuck yourself.
Lily.
Parlez-nous du premier jour de tournage au Texas. J'ai entendu dire que c'était un jour de tournage difficile.
I'm not sure what the first day, but what was the question? The first.
She's asking about the first shooting and what it was like. Word was that it was very tough. Let me say it this way: there were 6 producers there on the first day, and I didn't even know who most of these guys were. And I said, "What? I know what those 2 or 3 producers do, but what are the others there for?" And they said, they said that to me, they're there to fire me if I'm falling behind in the first week. So I go like, okay, I guess the pressure is on. So on the first day of shooting, we shot 25 pages, the entire first act, leading up all the way.
Stop. You have to stop because the average is 3. So 25, I don't think anybody would believe. I'm sorry, but 11
I can guarantee you,
incredible.
It wasn't the bus. 24 pages. On 25, the hitchhiker happens, which is the second day.
You're now going to get the other half of our relationship. Okay, here's what happened as I recollect. Right, everybody for the preparation is telling Marcus how they think it should go. Right, Marcus, all directors, they become directors because they want to tell everybody what to do. They have a plan. They don't want to be told what to do. You came to me and said, everybody's telling me what to do. I hate it. God damn it. On the first day, we'll shoot out the van on the first day. Whether it be 11 pages or 25, you guys will give you a script. Somebody can count them. But anyhow, what the task was, we're shooting out the van on the first day. He goes, well, they'll be so impressed, they'll leave me alone. They won't even know what to say. They'll go away. I'll never have to talk to them again. Okay, Marcus. But what we in order to accomplish that, we have to rehearse this. No. The Friday before, you wanted to go shoot some inserts and things just to get it going, sort of get a little warm-up shoot. I said, no. On this Friday, we have to put the van on the process trailer because it's a trailer we use to tow it so they don't have to drive. We'll put the dolly track around.
Wait, let me explain that. The day before the shoot is always for camera test. I said, fuck, we don't have to test the camera. We start shooting right then. So Daniel's holding me back.
I said, no, we don't start shooting. If you want to shoot out the van, all these pages in the van, you want to shoot that out, we have to rehearse it. Now, what happened is now we're in the outside in Texas in the summer, in what I would believe is 39 degrees centigrade. And of course, when you're shooting with a moving vehicle, you have to have the windows closed because otherwise you have sound problems as cars go the opposite way or whatever happens. And also you can't run the air conditioning because it's also a sound issue. So it's ungodly hot in there. And they're sweating profusely. And at which point, we don't know what we're going to do about it because we have a different idea makeup-wise for them. But the sweat is making it run. And at which point I come to the realization that, Marcus, the only way to proceed with this is because you wanted them to have a look. You didn't want them to look clean and everything perfect and precise. They'd been in the van for 5 days. They should look a little distressed. So I said, well, look, of course, it's a little bit of a trick because I know it's good for my light. I said, really, they should just be sweaty. That's the look. At which point you agreed right away. The producers were over the moon. And then we went off and we did do that, shoot that scene out on the first day. Because it was very simple. Everything was in place, the lights, everything. All we had to do was drive out there and snap the camera on the tripod and start shooting. And I believe
and
you.
Four producers left the same evening, and I didn't get fired.
And I believe you operated that as well, didn't you, Marcus? I think you did.
Probably because I just know we all crammed into that van. It was just absolutely insane. Look, when they asked me who I had in mind for the lead, I said, I don't know. I want somebody vulnerable. And I pitched for the female lead a Sissy Spacek type of a person. And they went like, this is a Michael Bay movie. That's not going to happen. She's not going to be a Sissy Spacek. And I go like, well, who do you guys have in mind? And they send me a picture of Jessica, and I think it was a cover of Maxim magazine, right? All dolled up. And I go like, I absolutely hate that idea. You know, she looks like she can defend herself. She doesn't look vulnerable, and she looks too glam. So the moment all that makeup washed away in that van, in that heat, I looked through the camera and I went like, that looks good. She was unglammed, and it informed the look of the film in many ways.
See, shooting the van was very important to me because the one thing I didn't like about my work on the original was the fact that it was blown out the windows is completely white out. We didn't even need to drive the car on the original. I had no lights, so I was simply exposing the film with the light that was inside the van. And the technology at that time, finishing in film, it blew it all out. So for me, this was the one thing that I wanted to change about the original was to light it enough to be able to read the detail of what was happening outside the windows as they drove.
I remember there was one scene where they had to drive. And I went like, how is Daniel going to light that? They're going through like thick branches, right? So what we did is we put 4 turntables next to the windows of the car. The car never moved, but we turned the turntables, which made it look like it was driving through a forest. So he could put the light in front of it, and they just shook the van a little bit. It never moved. It was great fun. We did a lot of stuff like that.
This is one of Marcus's genius ideas, which he has many. He has them often, and there's things just like this. Everyone went, this is not going to work. We literally built a rotating stand, 4 rotating stands, like he said, with all these leaves on it, and just turned them. And it looks just like they're driving through a very thickly wooded part of the forest. But in fact, they weren't going anyplace at all. But really,
you would be sitting there. You would think we don't know what we're doing. It looked like we're crazy.
Yeah, because of course I understood Marcus's genius, having worked with him so many years. But the producers didn't understand it. They go, "Oh no, this is not going to work. Not going to work."
He's ruining it all. So actually, here's one of my favorite setups that I did with Daniel, and it was for the movie Pathfinder. And in it, the lead character is escaping 2 sleds of Vikings. He's on a shield sliding through the snow down a hill, and then 2 sleds with Vikings are hacking down on him, with the mace and with their axes and so on. And again, the problem is, where do you put the camera if you go down a wild chase down a hill, right? So what we did is we built a 3-tier turntable, a big one in the middle, a ring around it, and then another ring around that. The middle one and the outer one got a sled, and the between would be called Urban on his shield. And we could control the different speeds. Then we put branches or trees all tight around it, and we put the camera right in front of Carl. And we went like in a merry-go-round in circles for half a day and shot the entire scene. If we would have had to do that on a hill, it would be down the hill. 2 minutes later, we have to go back up again. So we could shoot. The only problem was Carl Urban got really sick from vertigo. But with the exception of that, those turntables can save your life if you have a lot of work to do in a limited amount of time. So hey, we would really be amiss not to mention the scene we shot on the second day, because the first day, essentially shooting the entire first act. The first act is 25 pages. Page 25, the inciting moment that gets the movie really started, is the suicide of the hitchhiker. And when I pitched it to Michael Bay, it was actually one of those ideas that got me the job. I said, like, here's the kind of stuff we can do. And I showed the scene sort of storyboarded. It's kind of funny if you pitch something to Michael Bay, because here's a guy who destroyed the world 3 times over in his movies, and you show him something out of a horror movie, and he's like, ooh. Like that, literally. He can't take any violence on film. Anyway, I showed to him, and so everybody was intrigued. And now we had to figure it out. Daniel.
Marcus said to me, he said, Daniel, this is an interesting story. We were doing a commercial about 5 years prior to this, you're being hired to direct the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And you showed up that morning and you said to me, Daniel, have you seen Premiere Magazine? And I said, what? He said, oh, they reckon you invented the dolly. I go, what? And I start to ask you, Marcus, he said, don't ask me any more questions. He goes, I need a PA. You send a PA over. You gave the PA $10. Go to the newsstand and buy a copy of Premiere Magazine. Doesn't tell me. Come back, and in this Premiere Magazine, there's an article about the invention of the dolly shot. And it starts out with F.W. Murnau invented the dolly. The first shots ever were done by Murnau, the German expressionist filmmaker, right? And then it was taken to even greater use by Alfred Hitchcock, and perfected even beyond that by Jean-Luc Godard. But perhaps the most pertinent dolly shot of all time is Daniel Pearl's under the swing dolly shot in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So you said, I saw this, I couldn't believe it. I started to cry. I mean, I'm in a paragraph with Murnau and Hitchcock and go, oh, this is incredible.
And by the way, Steven Spielberg references it as one of his favorite shots ever.
Steven Spielberg, if we want to digress to that, I was introduced to him. He was about to roll in 1941. My previous wife was his makeup artist, and she wanted me to meet Steve, and she invited me to the set. And she goes, Steven, this is Daniel Pearl. He goes, Daniel, I'd like to introduce you to Daniel Pearl. Daniel Pearl, you shot the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I go, yes, I did. He goes, I got to ask you about the swing shot. Puts his arm around me, walks me off the set. I go, you're about to roll. He goes, oh, they can wait. Takes me to John Belushi's trailer RV and proceeds to vacuum my brain about everything he wants to know about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, while John Belushi tries to be the center of attention by having a barroom brawl with himself. He's breaking plates, he's breaking stools, he's smashing things up, he's throwing himself back and forth around the room. It's completely crazy. But anyhow, this shot is referenced by a lot of people all the time. It's considered one of the greatest shots of all times, dolly shots. And so Marcus says, we have to have a signature shot, Daniel. So Marcus designs a shot that is going to start, you've seen it in the film, it starts at the in the front where this wiggly hula dancer is on the dashboard, and pulls back through the people, back through the cast, they're all screaming, back through the head of the girl who shoots herself in the head, out the exit hole of the wound as the head falls over, out the hole in the window, and all the way out to a super big wide shot in the field. So that's the shot that he designs. It's a great shot, and people talk to me about it all the time. Excuse me for not remembering it before, but it was about trying to put together the second day. Anyhow, what we did to make that shot, it was pretty straightforward, but the one thing I needed to do was I needed to get the camera to be able to travel through the van and then go out into this field, and the car was elevated, so I needed to have camera on a crane, and basically in the end I cut about a 30 centimeter wide hole down the whole length of the van, and there was no rear window in it. And so the camera is able, the arm of the crane is outside the van, but the camera's hanging down on an L-shaped bracket.
We had to cut a groove in the roof to fit the mag through.
Yeah, that's the whole camera was hung down in there. The crane arm itself was outside, but the camera was hung down on an L-shaped bracket inside the car, and then goes out and travels out. And when we tried to make the shot, because the idea was that it goes through the head of the girl, so we used a probe lens rather than a lens is normally about this wide. We went with a probe lens, which is that long, I should say, much longer but very skinny. And we already had the head of that we're going to see, that the camera goes through as it flops over backwards. You see it was already skewered around the lens. So the head is with the camera in the beginning of the shot. And as we track back through, when we get to the point where it's supposed to meet that seat and the body where the head should connect, somebody from the prop department was supposed to make sure that the head connected to the body correctly. Well, at the time, it's out in a big open field. There was only one tree that I could hide a light behind, so I needed the low contrast where at the end of the day, it still looks like daytime, but the shadows are not nearly as strong as they are in the middle of the day. So I asked to shoot in that period of the day, which is like basically the last 25 minutes of the day. And we tried to get it during that, and the prop man kept getting it not right. So we had to actually come back another day at the end of the following day, and we got it on the second take. But it was a very tricky shot because of that manipulation that had to be done by the prop man.
So you see the hole in the head occurred right at the rear window, but we're in a bus. And in order to stick the probe lens through it and start on the hula girl, the head had to travel with the lens. So the head travels with the lens through the van till it comes into resting motion and in the resting position, and then the lens goes out of that. Now, of course, you have two seats of the actors in between, so they had to be on rails also and move apart for the camera to fit through, and that rubber head, who I remember I kept on referring to as the rubber pussy. And then we were told not to do that anymore because it was deemed offensive already by the standards of Texans and back then. By the way, this is funny too. They for us, nothing ever moved fast enough. And the crew complained at a certain point to Daniel about the lights being so big and that we don't use lights that big in Texas. And Daniel, the quetch, had the perfect answer.
Yeah, they came to me and go, yeah, we don't use lights this big in Austin, Texas. I said, there would be no filmmaking in Austin, Texas if it wasn't for me. Just put the fucking light where I tell you.
This guy invented filmmaking in Austin, Texas, and they're telling him.
This brings to mind something that I have to talk about too, because Michael Bay, look, as I explained to you, I am all about, as is Marcus, we're all about making great films. Right. Eventually, we start out, we just want to make films. We want to make films. You don't care. And then eventually it becomes a career. But we still have that same passion that the films have to be great. Right. And, sometimes things like I just told you, I have to put the fucking light where I said, that happens. So anyhow, they said, when they decided to hire me, they go, oh, Michael Bay is going to have to talk to you about how you behave with the crew. I go, oh, okay. Michael Bay, this is funny because Michael Bay is the biggest screamer in all of Hollywood. But if that's what it's okay, fine. So I think this is crazy. Anyhow, when I tell Marcus that Michael, of course, that conversation never happened. It would have been too humorous. It actually never happened, that conversation. But when I told you, Marcus, that Michael Bay is worried that I have to, he said, "Fuck that! I want everyone afraid of you. I want the cast to be afraid of you. You will create the horror that they will feel, that they will translate to the screen." He told me that. He said, everybody to be afraid, everyone should be afraid of you. And of course, that was fine by me. I was happy to proceed on that basis.
Dans les films d'horreur, les maisons ont souvent un rôle central. Dans Psychose, l'original de Massacre à la tronçonneuse, la maison de votre version de Texas Chainsaw est très différente de la maison originale. Quelle a été votre inspiration pour la conception de cette maison et comment l'avez-vous filmée et éclairée?
Well, to Michael Bay's credit, he had the location scouted before I even came on board, Daniel soon after. And it was really on the strength of those locations that I got very, very excited about doing this. And they were well photographed, and it looked scary. And in particular, that house, after Psycho, you want that kind of a house, and we found it. Interestingly enough, we had to do very little to the house because it was owned by a family that feuded over the inheritance ever since, I think, the 20s or 30s. So the house has not been touched ever since. It was covered in black mold. It looked well preserved. To put in perspective, when we scouted the basement, they said, "Oh, don't go in the back." And I go, "Well, why?" And they said, "Well, we're not very proud of it, but there's still the shackles from the slaves." That was a house we shot that in. The black mold was such a problem that we decided, because I didn't want them to clean it up, to shellac it, to just lacquer it and seal it. So we kept that look. I think all we added were like a bunch of pigs, but otherwise it was pretty much the way we found it.
Yeah, we had there's another guy who we work with all the time, Greg Blair, was our production designer, and he did a brilliant job for us. And as Marcus described, we were actually not allowed in that house, and we were afraid we were going to lose the house because of the mold, because it's dangerous. If you breathe the mold, it'll get in your lungs, and you'll wind up with mold growing in your lungs, which would be a terrible thing to have happen. But Greg Blair and his crew, they had to get not only prepare the set for us to shoot in, they also had to clean the place to make it, a healthy environment for us to be in. although it doesn't look like it at all. It looks perfect from the get because it is a mess. But anyhow, they managed to overcome that problem.
A few years ago, I had to go to the doctor wheezing and coughing. And I go like, what's the problem? They say like, well, it's asthma. And I say, asthma now? I'm an old dude. I never had asthma before. She said, were you exposed to fungi or anything, great humidity? And I said like, how does 3 horror movies in a row sound? Like, that's not about to do it.
We've breathed a whole lot of smoke in our careers. The smoke that we put on the sets is a lot of it. And we live in it.
Yep.
J'ai entendu dire que Michael Bay pouvait être assez intense sur un tournage, pour rester poli. Comment était-ce de travailler avec lui? Est-ce qu'il était vraiment impliqué dans la production et la réalisation du film, ou est-ce qu'il vous a laissé faire ce que vous vouliez?
I met him twice. He was already into shooting Bad Boys 2, and when I delivered the rough cut, he was still shooting Bad Boys 2. But the meetings bookended it in a kind of interesting way. So the first meeting, he goes, listen, Marcus, I'm not going to tell you how to make a movie. Obviously, you know where to put the camera and such, but I don't want you to make the same mistakes I have made. So I go like, do tell, what could that possibly be? And he says, you don't want to cut it too fast. If you cut it too fast, they'll hang you for it because we're music video guys and they will frown upon that. I said, look, I'm so glad you're saying that because I wouldn't want to cut it fast. You have to let it linger a little bit. It makes it scarier. It brings out suspense. He says, exactly. So shooting the movie and I'm showing him the rough cut. And he goes, it looks good. Performances are great. But you got to cut. I said, like, what? He says, like, you can't let it hang there like that. Like, for example, when Jessica is at the trailer, she is just sitting there. And I go like, yes, all her friends are dead. She's grieving. But then the door of the trailer, you know, gets opened and hits her in the ass. And there's a great fake jump scare. And holding on the scene a little bit to give her that grief is good for a character and will make the jump scare so much scarier. No, you got to cut. She looks weak. Stealth. So he used the word stealth. You got to show more stealth. So it was suddenly like making a Bruckheimer movie. And I came to the realization that if you make a movie for Michael Bay, essentially you're making an action movie in horror disguise. So it's not by accident that Jason runs. He used the word velocity for that. We got to have more velocity. I wouldn't even think of those terms. You know, stealth, velocity. Okay. All right. I guess it's a hybrid of an action movie and a horror movie. My own sensibilities, and especially after having done so many music videos, was putting more faith into character acting and suspending a scene. But in the end, you watch it with an audience and you see what a big part adrenaline plays for a modern audience. You look when you watch the movie at people's body language. Are they wiggling with their feet? Are they fidgeting? Right? And you see immediately how energy goes. Maybe that's a big difference between the original and the remake is you have to deal with the attention span, you know, of a modern day audience. And you go like, how much do you follow your own sensibilities of suspending and tension? And how much do you want to cater to the adrenaline expectation of a modern day audience? That's a very hard compromise to make.
Y a-t-il des scènes ou des éléments du scénario que vous n'avez pas pu inclure dans le film final?
Funny you should ask. So, yes, there were bookends originally, and the bookends was Aaron as a 65-year-old woman telling the story. They're finding that lost roll of film. Because nobody believed her story originally. Today, in those bookends, It's a little bit like Little Big Man. She's 70 years old and in an insane asylum. And now there's evidence that shows that probably her story is true. I was very excited about it, but ultimately, when we showed it, it was considered a downer. She's an old lady now. She was all her life in an insane asylum. And my editor at the time for all of my commercials, this guy whose name is Jay Friedkin, not related to the director William Friedkin. And Jay told me, Marcus, did I ever tell you about the day that I edited for Stanley Kubrick? And I go, what do you mean you edited for Stanley Kubrick? He says, yeah, I was a trailer editor on The Shining, and I did one cut on The Shining. And I said, explain. And he says, in The Shining, at the end, Shelley Duvall is in an insane asylum, and everything that happened is her narrative. You had the same ending that The Shining had, and we also tested it, and The Shining didn't test well, so we eliminated that scene. So I realized, wow, if Stanley Kubrick can make an adjustment, so can I. So that got cut as well. Same story, same book ends. Great question.
Funny, I forgot we shot that scene until you just mentioned it.
And by the way, my wife plays the nurse. She was in it. And you see, as I say, kill your favorite people sometimes, you know, when you make a movie, sometimes you have to lose scenes that are maybe really, really important for you, but ultimately, if the movie doesn't play, they got to go. By the way, I should mention that too. The lady that plays her as an older lady, she gave me a book. And when I saw it, I went like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. The title of the book was Women, Chainsaws, and the Men Who Make Those Movies, written by a feminist. And I go like, oh my God, she's going to completely trash us. But it turns out that this feminist wanted to trash those movies. She never watched them. But when she wrote the book, she forced herself to watch these movies, of course. She had to write about them. And she came to the realization that they're all about female empowerment, that this is one of the few Hollywood genres where women are actually the heroes, not just a squeeze for some men. They usually start as the underdog, a pixie, and then transform themselves into a woman and a formidable opponent to as big of a foe ever since King Kong. They started essentially examining it with Psycho, and then went all the way to, you know, Texas Chainsaw, Silence of the Lambs. And her interpretation, and bear with me here, and I thought it was a very good one, is that ever since Psycho, the paradigm of a horror movie changed, that it essentially deals with the gender identity crisis of the American male. Women became more and more emancipated, and men more and more were questioned in their masculinity, today more than ever before. And therefore, Anthony Perkins essentially becomes the mother. The big phallic shape of the alien monster becomes the bitch, right? The Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs wants to be a woman. It's pretty consistent if you really look at it, of course, in a very similar way. Leatherface fashioning a face of those who he somewhat envies for their good looks and whatever they represent. So really, really interesting book. If you guys get a chance and get a hold of it for aficionados of those kind of movies, it's a great read.
Although I have to say that, you know, the concept of the final girl, it's a fantastic, concept for horror films. And having been to these conventions lately, I'm sure you've seen it as well. You meet a lot of final girls at the horror conventions, right, Marcus? Don't you?
Yeah. I had a really hard time with Friday the 13th. That script we got during a writer's strike. So we couldn't make any adjustments because no writer in America was allowed to work on it. The only thing we could really play with were was a staging, like the kill scenes. But the movie was written and it could only be made during the writer's strike if everybody would agree that it's a go script. I thought that would never happen. You know, Michael Bay's camp, us, the actors, everybody had to agree. And my biggest issue was there was no final girl. The reason why I wanted to do it is because in the first act, everybody gets killed. I've never seen anything like this before. Yeah. And I went like, I want to make that movie for that reason alone. But the main character is male. Jared Padalecki was playing. And the reason why I cast him is because he looked boyish to me. I thought he was a little guy. I wanted somebody who's sort of like a man-child that I would feel needs protection, that looks vulnerable. When the guy walked through the door, he was taller than, you know, our Jason. So very often Jason had to stand on an apple box to look intimidating to Jared Padalecki. That was not your typical final girl that gets to transform herself. And I still believe the movie could have done twice as well with a female final girl.
Votre remake de Massacre à la tronçonneuse a maintenant 20 ans, plus de 20 ans. Avec le recul, est-ce que vous l'avez regardé récemment? Est-ce que vous en êtes fier? Et est-ce que vous aimeriez changer quelque chose maintenant avec le recul ou voilà?
When you make a movie, by the time you're done, you've watched it thousands of times. And you wish you could take a pill that makes you forget everything that went into the process of making it. Because you might like it for all the wrong reasons. Or do you like it for the same reason the audience likes it? A lot of people that watched it as their first time horror movie experience loved it. A lot of movies that watched the original when they were teenagers, they hated it. Makes sense. You see, but as a filmmaker, you can say, okay, we got solid performances, or we liked the look that Daniel delivered. And but is it scary? Because we're selling it as a scary movie. Is it genuinely scary? That is the one thing you can't evaluate if you made it. And there's a funny thing that happened. We didn't have a reshoot. We did some additional shooting. And it was essentially to fulfill Michael Bay's desire to have Leatherface come out one more time. If you remember, we took his arm off. And then he went like, he got to come back one more time forceful. When Aaron takes off in her car, he comes out of the dark and swipes at the car one more time. We shot the scene. The editor got it. And I came in that evening to watch the cut one more time, having no idea that the editor already put it into the movie. I'm watching it with him. And at the end, when I thought it was over, Leatherface comes out, swipes the car, and I was like, I was startled by my own movie, which until that point never happened before, because I was truly startled because I didn't know it would be in there. And that's when I realized that it can be scary. Until that point, I had no clue about that particular aspect. It's like if you do a prank, you want to scare somebody in the dark, you know where the buttons are, you pushed it, so you will never have that genuine first-time experience of getting scared. So when the movie premiered, my agent thought it was a good idea to watch it with an audience. And we went to the Bridge, which is the biggest movie theater in Los Angeles. It's right at the airport. And when we asked the usher if we can get in with the filmmakers, we just wanted to see it with the audience. He told us that it's playing like gangbusters, in particular because it was a big football game happening that day. But every performance was sold out. And he said we had at least 40 people report to us saying that they needed assistance. that day. And I went, what does that mean? He says, well, they feel sick to the stomach watching the movie. And I say, so what do you do with them if they want assistance? He says, well, we take them to the parking lot. They walk in circles a little bit. And then they usually want to go right back in and continue watching. So I thought, I guess that's a good sign. So I'm sitting all the way in the back. And at that point, you're not watching the movie any longer. You're watching the audience. And since you asked me, when I watch it again, what is that like? And would I want to do anything different? Well, every time I watch it with an audience, it's like I'm watching it for the first time again, because I'm watching the audience and how they perceive it. And when I was sitting in the back, and you see it on the big screen, funny is funnier, scary is scarier. And you're sitting all the way in the back, you're sitting behind the guys in the wheelchairs, the paraplegics, right? So they're right in front of me. And I remember there was one jump scare when the sheriff knocks on the window that I was in particular concerned about. While experimenting with it to make it scarier, I realized that if the knock happened slightly earlier before we see him on the window, it was scarier, and I wanted to see how that played. It was one of those last-minute changes that I've never seen with an audience. And when the knock happened, one of the guys in the wheelchair jumped out of his chair and windmilled with his arms. And I went like, wow, you know, if there's one redeeming value to this movie is I made somebody in a wheelchair on feet. So every time you watch it, it's slightly different. And it's actually most of the fun. It's actually one of the main reasons why I enjoy doing horror. Because Daniel and me, well, Daniel more than me, he did the original one. But when you do commercials and music videos, you never see your audience. You console yourself that people, you know, love what you did. But reality is they probably, during the commercial interruption, fix themselves a grilled cheese sandwich or take a piss. So you don't really know how the movie plays unless you see it with an audience. And for that alone, because the audience is part of the performance. It's part of this cult. It's part of this ritual. And everybody knows the rules. The final girl, the black guy dies first, you know, and you play with it a little bit. Cabin in the Woods had fun with that. You know, you rearrange it a little bit, the furniture, and see how people bump into it in the dark. That is really the fun. So when a lot of people say, oh, it has all these stereotypes, they have to be there. You count on the fact that people expect those stereotypes, but you rearrange it slightly every time you make one of those, and that's what you build upon. So therein lies the secret.
Perfect.
Thank you a lot.
Merci beaucoup, Marcus.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. You gave
Thank
us
you
so much stuff. So the editing will be...
You have so much to edit around.
Yeah, but that's my job.
Bye-bye.
Au revoir, Marcus.
Bye.
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 Bye.